Stories never heard before. The Iron Monsoon. In the shadow of the Western Ghats, where the mountains of Maharashtra lean against the sky like sleeping giants, a village once thrived on the rhythm of the loom. To the outside world, it was a mere speck on a map, but to those within its emerald embrace, it was the center of a sacred industry. The village was famous for its fire weavers, artisans who mastered the shala plant. They harvested resilient fibers and cured them with precise heat, transforming raw vegetation into silk that shimmered, with the iridescent depth of a peacock's plumage. The air was perpetually thick with the scent of drying stalks, and sweet musky natural dyes boiling in copper vats. Families passed down secret techniques for timing the curing process, watching steam rise from leaves, to judge the exact second the fiber reached peak tensile strength. Life was dictated by the seasons. The summer sun determined the vibrancy of colors, and the first rain signaled a time of rest. Arnav was the youngest practitioner, a boy whose soul seemed synchronized with the wooden machinery of his craft. His life was measured by a steady heartbeat of clack drum, a mechanical melody that harmonized with the laughter of his sister, Isha. From age 5, Arnav sat at his father's feet, learning to distinguish fiber textures by touch, his fingers dancing with a grace that older weavers envied. While Arnav was the technician, Isha was the spirit of the village. She gathered blossoms for dyes. She understood the chemistry of the mountainside, knowing which berries yielded deep indigo, and which barks produced the golden hue of a setting sun. Together, they represented the continuity of a tradition survived for generations, a legacy etched into the soil. Their home was a sanctuary, where half-finished tapestries draped over every surface, and floors were stained with the vibrant spills of their trade. However, the monsoon of Arnav's 20th year did not arrive with the usual scent of wet earth. It brought a bruised purple sky, and rain that tasted of iron. The wind groaned, carrying a weight that pressed down on the lungs of the village. The atmosphere was heavy with a premonition that the villagers, blinded by decades of predictable seasons, failed to interpret. They reinforced thatched roofs and moved looms to higher ground, assuming this was merely a harsher version of the familiar. But the rain did not cease. For 3 weeks, the heavens remained open, until the earth could hold no more. The mountainside became a saturated, unstable weight. Soil that was usually firm, turned into a gelatinous mass, that shivered with every thunderclap. On a Tuesday night, the northern face of the peak vanished in a roar, that sounded like the world being torn in half. It was a liquid collapse, the foundation of their existence simply gave way. Arnav was swallowed by a slurry of liquid lead, a suffocating wall of mud that erased his home in seconds. He remembered only being tossed like a leaf in a gale, the terrifying cold of mud filling his mouth, and a fleeting glimpse of yellow fabric disappearing into the dark. When he woke days later in a resettlement camp, his world was gone. The silence was a jagged contrast to the rhythmic life he had lost. He was greeted by the smell of antiseptic, and the realization that his left leg was gone, but physical pain was nothing compared to the news that Isha had been lost to the mud. For months, Arnav lived in the stillness. A psychological silence so deep, that even the kindness of his neighbor, Kaki, could not pierce it. The camp was a sea of blue plastic and grey despair, where the future felt like an impossibility. Arnav looked at his hands, once instruments of fine art, and saw only tremors. The callus he developed over years, felt like alien growths on a body, without purpose. He believed he was a broken instrument, a weaver with no thread and no feet, rendered obsolete by a mountain that had moved. To him, the silk was dead, because the world requiring such beauty was buried. He spent days staring at the grey horizon, waking in the night to reach for a loom shuttle, only to grasp cold damp air. His dreams were haunted by the sound of looms clacking in phantom rhythm, and each morning he awoke to the cruel reminder that the music of his craft had been silenced. The shift began with the sight of children, playing in the camp mud. These children possessed a fierce, intuitive will to survive. He watched them scavenge scraps of shredded blue tents and copper wire, tying them together to create a makeshift kite. Their laughter acted as a catalyst. That spark of resilience forced Arnav to realize that while the Shala plants were gone, the world was still full of materials, waiting to be bound together. He looked at the waste, plastic bottles, frayed ropes, rusted wire, and saw a new kind of fiber. He began to scavenge the ruins, dragging his frame through muck, to collect what others called trash. He salvaged industrial plastic, jute sacks, and twisted metal, each piece a fragment of a life interrupted. He built a skeletal loom from PVC pipes and scrap metal, teaching his scarred hands to work with unforgiving materials. The process was agonizing. Plastic did not yield like Shala fiber, and wire bit into his palms. Yet, the physical struggle grounded him. This was his courage, the willingness to try something harsh, because the beautiful and old was dead. He began to weave small mats, showing survivors that the debris of destruction could be repurposed into tools of endurance. Arnav soon realized he could not weave this new world alone. He formed a collective, an assembly of survivors who shared his scars, and a hunger for a reason to wake up. They gathered in communal tents, their hands moving in unison as they shared stories of loss and hope. Together, they turned disaster debris into iridescent rugs, and waterproof tapestries. The textures were rough and colors clashing, but they possessed a raw beauty. They were processing trauma, knotting collective grief into structures stronger than the original silk. Each knot was a memory, each weft a step toward reclaiming agency. They sold these creations to aid organizations, using proceeds for medicine and better building materials. 3 years later, when the disaster zone reopened, Arnav returned to the village. The mountain was still a vast, brown wound, but nature had begun its slow return. He carried a 20-foot memory shroud, a shimmering bandage woven from the salvaged clothes of the deceased, and synthetic recovery fibers. It was the masterwork of the collective, containing a piece of every family from the village. He reached the ancient banyan tree of his childhood, one of the few living things that had withstood the landslide. Its roots were exposed, clutching at the unstable earth. As he draped the protective shroud over the battered roots to prevent erosion, Arnav experienced profound clarity. Covering the scars of the earth mirrored the way he had covered the scars of his soul. Recovery was not about returning to the person he was, it was about becoming something entirely new, forged in the crucible of loss. He looked at a section of the shroud, a strip of Isha's yellow dress, held permanently between strands of industrial copper and nylon. He felt her presence not as a ghost, but as a structural component of his new life. He understood that while the mountain had broken his world, reassembling the fragments had created something invincible. The weakness of individual threads was replaced by the strength of the union. He spent the remainder of his life in a new village built on safer ground. It lacked the ancient charm of the old one, but was designed with an understanding of the mountain's power. He became a teacher of the philosophy of the join. He taught children that a thread only has value when crossed by another, and that personal scars were the places where they were now most reinforced. He showed them how to find beauty in the broken, and how to build a life that could withstand the storm. His lessons were not confined to weaving. He spoke of patience, of listening to silence, of honoring grief without being consumed by it. He reminded them that resilience was not the absence of pain, but the ability to transform pain into strength. His words became mantras for the new generation, guiding them through their own struggles. When Arnav passed away as an old man beneath the banyan tree, he did so in a village that no longer trembled at the monsoon. The memory shroud had merged with the bark, a permanent testament to resilience. He left a final lesson: the human spirit grows stronger every time it is stretched to the breaking point. His legacy was found in the unbreakable bond of a community that knew how to weave hope from the ashes of its past. And in the quiet rustle of the banyan leaves, villagers swore they could still hear the faint clack thrum of a loom, echoing through time, reminding them that beauty could be born, even from ruin. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more.